Another talk. I did promise to carry on by talking about some of the deeper meditation experiences, nimittas and stuff. But first of all, how this all happens. I mentioned many times, when you are still, things disappear. So one of the great ways of looking at meditation is allowing the five senses to vanish. So you can find out what the sixth sense is. And that is my simile of the emperor. Once there was an emperor, and no one knew if the emperor was a man or a woman, whether it was Chinese, Caucasian, African, Eskimo, alien. I didn't know whether it was old or young, because the only time the emperor appeared in public, the emperor was covered in 5 pieces of clothing. They had boots which went right up to the thigh. They had trousers which overlapped the top of the boots and went down to the ankles. Had a jacket and the bottom overlapped the top of the trousers. Had sleeves going down to the wrists and a high collar. It wore gloves which overlapped the sleeves. And lastly, a helmet which overlapped the top of it, the jacket. So they had 5 pieces of clothing: the boots, the trousers, the jacket, the gloves, and the helmet. So every inch of the skin was covered, so no one knew what the emperor was. And the only way you could find out is take all the clothes off and see what was underneath. And in that simile, the emperor is your mind, the thing in control of you, the most important part of you, the emperor. And the only way you can find out what the emperor is take off the 5 clothes, which in this simile mean the 5 senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching. And when those disappear, you can find out what's underneath, the mind. And that's the job of meditation. But of course, the only way you can get these senses to disappear is to keep them still. And one of the places where I'd learned how that works was when I went to a Zen retreat. I mentioned they carried this big stick. But one of the strange things I was asked to do was to keep my eyes open when I was meditating and to stare at a wall. So you'd all actually be on the outside rim of the hall and all turned facing the wall rather than facing inwards. And I'd never done that before, and I never knew what was supposed to happen. But what occurred after only about 15 or 20 minutes of staring at this wall, the wall vanished. And I thought that was really strange at first, but in those are the days of the 60s and 70s. I wasn't taking drugs, but I thought, wow, this is just like people say taking drugs. There was a wall there a minute ago, and now it's gone. What has happened? And of course, I used my reason, my logic, and it was quite a simple explanation. Your senses can only notice things which change. They're only wired, your brain is only wired to see things which move, which change. And if anything stays the same for a little while, it vanishes. It's one of the reasons why, the sound of the traffic in the background, if it's a constant hum, you can't hear it after a short while. You know why? The taste of the saliva in your mouth, you don't know it's there, because it doesn't change. Anything which is constant vanishes from your brain. And that's all that was happening, because I was staring, with full attention at this wall, and it was not changing at all. After a while, it just vanished. It was a weird experience, but then I recognized that happens every time you close your eyes. And if you're mindful enough, when you close your eyes, the first thing you see is the inside of your eyelids. But because that doesn't move, after a while, sight actually turns off. It's not that you're seeing nothing, you're not seeing. That whole sense has been switched off. And that is the trick on how to let go of these 5 senses and go into the realm of the mind. You've got to somehow be calm, be still, and allow things to vanish. And that is why we try and be quiet in a meditation room, while we make sure that we come in like burglars, not banging the doors, while we keep a noble silence. So the sound is pretty sort of even. It doesn't have to be perfectly quiet. There'll always be a background noise, as long as it doesn't change. And if it doesn't change, after a while, the brain just turns off listening. There's nothing to do there. and you've got your eyes closed so you don't see anything. That's why we meditate with eyes closed, because when your eyes are open, there's always somebody doing something. So keep the eyes closed, sight turns off, sound turns off, smell, taste off. As long as you don't eat too many beans, the smell of the room doesn't change. That's one of the reasons why they used to have lots of incense in the old days, to mask all the other smells. And if you do eat beans, please sit at the back. Don't sit in front of somebody. Otherwise they might. And it's actually true. Somebody told me this story in Ajahn Brahm's monastery. There was one monk, an old monk, who was always passing wind. And so no one would like to walk arms round behind him. They'd always leave a big space. And when Ajahn Brahm said, "Why are you leaving such a big space there between this monk and the next monk?" And he said, "Because of the wind, we can't stand it any longer." That's really true. Just old monks. So if you are an old person past wind, please make sure you sit at the back so you don't affect anybody. It's out of compassion. So there's no smell doesn't change, this taste doesn't change. The body is the hardest one to let go of because it's always irritating. So you try and sit comfortably, sit still. Sensations in the body get pretty even, and after a while they vanish. And therefore, you disappeared. And I say that the breath is always moving because the lungs are always got to take in air. And it's just a sort of a gentle progression, because everything else is still. You don't need to breathe in so much oxygen because you're not metabolizing so much, which means that the breath gets softer. As it gets softer, it needs less oxygen. So little by little, as you calm down, as your metabolism slows down, the breath gets softer and softer. And it doesn't stop, but it gets to that stage, it's so gentle, hardly any breath going in at all. And that's the stage where the breath can vanish. And then when it vanishes, that's the last part of the five senses gone. And when I understood this, it explained to me why we do the breath meditation. Or actually, even if you don't do the breath meditation, the breath usually comes up to you because it's the last thing moving. When everything else is slowed down, you have the breath left. So when I do my meditation, I never go looking for the breath. I just let go, relax, be in the moment, stop thinking and just be. And then after a while, when everything else is settled down, the only thing left is the breath. So the breath actually comes to me. That's what it feels like. And because I don't go looking for it and searching for it, and it comes to me, it's always very peaceful when it first comes up. So that's one of the nice things about this type of meditation. You don't go looking for the breath. You don't focus anywhere for the breath. You just let go, and after a little while, you are aware of the breath quite naturally. And you just carry on just letting go until the breath becomes so peaceful that the breath vanishes. Now what happens next is usually, you've now got the sixth sense, that's the only thing left, the mind. And how does that appear? Now the talk I gave yesterday was a very important talk about bringing up happiness in the meditation. Because a lot of people I've found, they can actually settle the body and settle all the senses, and the senses vanish, and they just go into a dark place, they're not really quite sure what's happening, and they don't see any lights, and the reason is they haven't got enough joy and happiness. The mind is not energized enough yet. So things have vanished, but you haven't got enough oomph, in your mindfulness to see what happens. It can be similar to the experience you may have had, or I'm sure you've had, of being in a bright room and going out into the garden at night time when it's dark, and when you first go out you can't see a thing. But after a minute or two, the pupils in your eye dilate, they get bigger, allowing more light to go into your eye, and after a few minutes you can actually see shapes. It just takes a while for your sense of sight to accommodate to the more subtle visual images in the night time. But after a while you can see things. That's sort of similar to what happens when the five senses vanish. Sometimes you just got to wait there. You're not quite sure what you're watching, but you're conscious, you're aware, you must be aware of something. It's just trying to wait until you figure out what that is you are aware of. So you just stay there when the five senses vanish and to see what happens. And after a while, usually, just like the mind becomes more sensitive, it gets more power, more energy, and it starts to see things. And you may be able to see little flecks of light there, the beginnings of nimittas, which is great. But it's much better if that keeps happening to you a lot and you can't see any nimittas, the senses vanish and there's nothing there. It's usually the case, that you don't have enough energy in the mind. So you make it more happy. And it's because of that that, I started asking people to develop the delightful breath. So when you're breathing, the breath is just wonderful. And you are appreciated just how peaceful and how wonderful it is. One of the ways of doing that is getting rid of the fault-finding mind and replacing it with a grateful mind. Or what we said last night, and someone asked a very good question, what's the connection between gratitude and metta, loving kindness? It's a very close connection. And so if you have a grateful mind, and you're just so grateful to be here, so grateful just to be able to get this far in meditation, you're not finding fault with things. That negativity which sucks up your mental energy disappears. And that means you have a happier mind. We all know that people are always fault-finding and complaining and criticizing. They're not happy people. And one of the reasons is because it sucks up your energy. But those people are just so positive, so grateful, so kind, they never sort of criticize anybody. Those types of people are always happy people. And it is because they're not wasting energy. So if you can develop that type of mind state even outside of your meditation, then it means you're such a happy mind that when the five senses vanish, your mind is already quite brilliant, it's powerful, simply because you made it powerful during the ordinary times of your day. And if you can't work this out during the ordinary times of the day, at least, when you get into breath meditation, have this beautiful sense of gratitude and just wonder, and this is so nice to be able to just meditate here. Now start to reflect, today is Tuesday. All of your friends are out working today. They had to get up and just fight in the traffic to get to work. And their boss is giving them all sorts of work which no reasonable person can ever do in the time the boss expects them to do. And they're having to struggle so much with their kids and taking them to school and the family and everything else. You don't have to do anything of that. Isn't this wonderful? You have a wife-free day. Yes. A husband-free environment. Oh, wonderful. That's for those of you who didn't bring your husband and wife with you. What did you do that for? Well, at least you can be silent. Don't have to talk to each other and complain. But when you think of what other people have to do today, and you're totally free, doesn't that give you a great sense of joy? Yes! And that's a sort of mind which can create happiness almost anywhere. So you get to this attitude in meditation retreats and in life of being one who looks for happiness and creates happiness. And it's always there to create. There's always a joke you can say somewhere. There's always, a funny way of looking at things. There's always a smile available for you, if you really want to. And when you do that, you're adding happiness. And you can start doing that into your breath, and you get this sense of a delightful, but this is wonderful. You don't take it for granted. Oh, it's just a breath. Yeah, it's peaceful. Okay, that's good enough. No. Just really appreciate it. And of course the other way, which is so close to gratitude, is loving kindness. Oh, nice breath. You're such a wonderful breath. I love you so much. Nice teddy bear. Oh, you're so wonderful. I better be careful because last time I couldn't hear because teddy bear was in the way. Oh, nice. When you start to get some loving kindness going up, you are making joy. That's one of the reasons we have the teddy bears here. There's one over there somewhere. Looks like that's a nun's teddy bear. I have to have the big teddy bear because, it suits me more. Those just so thin over there. No, because I've got bigger heart. That's why I have a big teddy bear. So when you start to take a teddy bear, it makes you soft. It brings up that happiness. So you'll find you're meditating, it's easy to meditate, and when you're meditating on the breath is much more delightful if you've got a teddy bear in your lap when you're meditating. Try it, prove it, it actually works. So once you get that delightful breath up, which is really, really important, then when the breath vanishes, you've already got lots of mental energy, mental happiness. So these lights are far more likely to arise if you begin with a happy breath and then the breath disappears. And it's always not enough joy and happiness. And I said in yesterday's talk, this is such an important part of a meditation retreat. That, when people come along and they say, I've gone on other retreats, like you said last night, and everyone is miserable, but on this retreat everyone is happy. This is for a reason. That you get much more nimittas when you come to a retreat and you're happy. Your mind has got much more energy, much more power. And you're more likely to get nimittas coming up. So once the breath disappears, what happens next is people start to see these lights. Now I must mention that not everybody sees a light, but it's not a physical light. It's a mental object. It's not seen with the eye. The eye is not working anymore. It's a mental object. But you interpret it as a light. It's just the way we look at or we perceive things of the mind. We always perceive them through the vocabulary of the five senses. And it looks like a light. It's experienced like a light. But the thing with nimittas is, yes, you experience them as a light, but they're different from what you see with your eyes. Number one, they can be really, really bright. And this happens, and I'm sure it will happen to you as it happened to me. Sometimes the nimitta is so bright, you think, I'm going to go blind. You can't keep looking at something this luminous and this intense. If you're looking at something like that with your real eye, yeah, you will go blind. But this is a mental object, so it can be as bright as you like, and it's actually the brighter the better. So it doesn't hurt you at all, because it's not seen with the eye. It's just the way we look. And one of the other things with the nimittas is that the colours you see. Yeah, you give them a name, that's blue, that's purple, that's green, or whatever colour you see. But it is more, say, yellow than any yellow you can see on any picture or painting. It's more intense, more deep, more blue than blue. Now that's a classic sign of these nimittas. They're really starting to see intense colours, because it's through the mind, it's not through the eyes. So these actually come up and they get really interesting, because you're going into deep states of meditation, but be careful, the spiritual materialism. Don't think, oh yeah, I've got the blue nimitta, and your friend says, blue nimitta, I got that years ago, I'm on the gold nimitta now. Please never do that sort of stuff. That is totally sort of missing the point. So you start to see these lights, but first of all when they come up, people are crazy. When these nimittas first come up and they come and see me, they say, well, I'm not quite sure whether there's a nimitta or not. I was sitting outside, it could have been the sun. Or, I was sitting in here at 2 o'clock in the morning, it could have been the sun. It could have been a headlight from a car. It could have been someone with a flashlight. Come on, you guys. No one uses flashlights here because we've got lights everywhere. Now, you don't get the sun coming through these windows at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's hardly any traffic on the road. You're not going to see the headlight of a car in here. But it's amazing how many people, the first time they see a light, they doubt it. And that's sort of, why do you keep doubting these things? And this was a nimitta. And sometimes people have got so low self-esteem. They think, no, I can't get these things. Maybe monks and nuns who've been in rows for years, but not me. Yes, you too. You can get these things. And this is all the years I've been teaching. It is almost 99.9% of the time when people come and ask me, I saw a light, was this a nimitta? 99.9% of the time it was a nimitta. So, it is such a good strike rate that if you see a light in your mind, you can actually just take it for granted. That is a nimitta. Don't even need to ask me. It's very, very unlikely this was something which was from the outside. So it's a nimitta. Now sometimes I say, oh, don't have spiritual pride, but I mean you will have some feeling of happiness. You're getting somewhere in the meditation. Great, praise yourself, feel good about yourself. Yes, you can meditate, you can get nimittas, woohoo! So once you've given yourself a bit of praise, then get back to work again. Which means you've got to stabilize those nimittas, so they don't just pop up and go all over the place. You know that there is also a very common phenomena that people meditate and the nimitta is, out to the left, up the top somewhere, or to the right. It's not centered. You know what people do? They go looking for it. Just as they go looking for it, it runs away. So, you don't do anything. You stay, the nimitta will come to you. So don't go looking for it. Don't try to center it. Just you stay still, and the nimitta will come to you. Or it just goes all over the place, changing, spiraling, just moving, and it can be very fascinating, like some light show, like some weird artist projection stuff. But that might be fascinating and interesting, all different colors and spirals and stuff going on. But that's far too complicated. Remember that Buddhism likes simplicity. The simpler, the more powerful. So what we're eventually looking for is just a single light. And the most simple shape is usually a circle. That is why the great nimittas always appear like the disk of a moon, the full moon at night. Simple, one color, but intense. So you want to simplify it and keep it stable. Now there's many ways of doing that. Now one way, and it's a very good trick which I've used and many other people used as well, you have a complicated nimitta, all sorts of stuff happening. You may even have like landscapes or mountains and meadows and stuff. And the trick is, or you may have Buddhas and other stuff you see. The trick is always to look for the most beautiful part. And a good example of that is years ago, once, the nimitta I got was actually a list of rolling meadows with a river and some trees. And I noticed that one of the trees, one of the leaves on one of those trees had a dewdrop on the end, which sparkled. That's what to go for. So I'm skillful enough at this, so straight away, you just let the mind, you didn't do anything, you let the mind focus on the sparkle of the dewdrop. And that sparkle was all you needed, whoosh, a nice big nimitta coming up. Because you need to have something which is beautiful, simple. And there's always something there. In any sort of complicated nimitta you might see. You might see a picture of a Buddha statue. Don't just worry about the Buddha statue. Just see something on it. It might just have a little mark on its forehead or something. Just go to something which is simple and beautiful, and then that will take over. What is actually happening here is a little skill of what we call focusing. I'm going on a sidetrack now, but it's a very important sidetrack for you to understand how this focusing business works, especially with the nimittas. And it's a simile of the TV set. I remember when I used to watch TVs, that you turn the TV on and you'd be able to see the edges of the TV and the photograph on top of the TV or the flower pot, whatever you put on top of the TV. I remember going to one person's house and seeing these two monks on top of their TV. And now at Bodhinyana, it was Sariputra and Moggallana. I think their grandfather was a soldier in Burma and brought them back as souvenirs. And this is very important sort of Buddhist icons. And she had them on top of the TV set. And so I told her, look, no, these are really important. That's Sariputra and Moggallana, beautiful wooden carvings. So, it doesn't really belong on the TV set. And she was good enough, she offered them to our monastery. But anyway, you have these things on top of the TV. But when you start watching the TV, after a few seconds, at least, maybe a minute or two at the most, you can't see what's on top of the TV set, what's underneath and what's to the side. All you can see is what's in the center. And that means it doesn't depend on how big your TV set is. That is one of the great myths of buying big TV sets. People have these huge plasma screen TV sets these days, massive things. And look, compare watching a movie on the big TV screens to watching a movie in economy class on Singapore Airlines or Malaysian Airlines or whatever, on these tiny screens in the back. You'll find that once you get into the screen, you can't tell the difference at all, because your mind fits into the screen, and what's on the edges vanishes. And it doesn't matter how big the screen is, your mind fits into it. So it's a total scam buying these big TV sets. The experience is absolutely the same. The only time you realize how big or how small the TV set is when it's not turned on. But when it's turned on and you're watching, the experience is the same. Check that out. You'll be surprised how accurate that is. Because you actually just fit in. And as you fit in, what's on the edges vanishes. Realizing that was a very useful skill on how to focus and how to avoid distractions. For example, you're sitting here and there's all these noises outside. Somebody's cooking dinner, or somebody's mowing the lawn, or there's traffic, or something's happening. And how can you overcome those distractions of noise? Same way you overcome distractions when watching a TV. Whatever you're supposed to be focusing, say you're supposed to be focusing on the breath, keep the breathing in the center of the screen. You can hear the sound, but it's on the edges. But keep the center with the breathing. And you'll find after a while, you don't know when, but it happens. All the sounds fall off the screen, you're only aware of the breathing. The problem is when there is a distraction, say a sound, we put the sound in the center of our screen. We just focus on the distraction. That becomes a problem, and that is central to our awareness. So any distraction you have, like a sound, keep it always on the edge. Don't make the big problem of it. Oh, it's just a sound, it's over there somewhere, but I'm watching my breathing. And after a while the sound will disappear. And that also happens with physical feelings in the body. If you have an ache or a pain, when you're way into the meditation and you start worrying about it, the pain, the ache, the irritation is the center of your screen. And your breath is over there somewhere, it just disappears. But if you can do the opposite, you're watching the breath and there's a pain, but it's over there somewhere, and your center is on the breathing, and always on the breathing, you can still experience the pain, but it's not central to you, it's just on the edge there somewhere, but I'm focusing on the breathing. Then after a while the pain just falls off your radar screen. You can't feel it anymore. Because it's the nature of the mind to focus in. Like watching a TV set, the edges of the screen soon vanish. And your mind fits just inside the screen. What's above, below, to the left and right vanishes. You're watching the breathing, after a while your mind fits into that breath. What's to the left, the right, above and below, your breathing vanishes. You can't hear things anymore, you can't feel the body, just have the breathing. It's a way of focusing, which is beautiful. And you also use that with nimittas. So you have like complicated nimittas, many stuff going on. You focus on something which is very beautiful. And you find everything else just falls off the screen. It has the feeling of like focusing the lens of a camera. You see the big picture first of all, you just focus on zooming in to a part of it. That's the nature of the mind to do that, to zoom in. And it will zoom in to what's really interesting or what's very beautiful, what attracts the attention. So you can actually start looking for the beautiful parts of nimittas. And you can actually focus in on that. Even if it is a simple nimitta, there's always parts of a simple nimitta, parts which are more beautiful than the others. So you always go to the most beautiful parts. And they sort of expand as you zoom in. And the most beautiful part of the beautiful part, that expands and it gets more beautiful, more intense. So what you're doing at the same time, you're stabilizing these lights and you're also increasing their intensity. They're becoming, and with the intensity, they're becoming brighter, and more beautiful and more delightful. The pleasure starts to increase. So you mess around with these nimittas that way. Now this is not something you do. The reason I say this at this particular time is because this is absolutely 100% brainwashing you. And I know this because my teacher did the same to me. He taught all these skillful means about watching nimittas and what to do with them. And at that time I didn't have hardly any nimittas, and so I didn't know what he was on about. And I thought I'd forgotten everything because it wasn't relevant to me. And later on, when I meditated, you had these nimittas, then an idea came up what to do with them, and it worked. And afterwards I thought, where did that idea come from? That was such a good idea. And then I remembered, Ajahn Chah told me that years ago. And I thought I'd forgotten it. And it's amazing, it's one of the incredible things about meditation. All these instructions on the deeper stages of meditation, they lodge in your mind somewhere. And when they're needed, and they will be, then they'll come up. So all this stuff which I'm teaching you, don't think, oh, that's just for these really smart-ass meditators who already got nimittas. Not me. I just want to learn how to be relaxed. I just want to learn how to stop thinking. This is way over my head. Never think that way. Because these instructions are going to be in there, and one day they're going to be needed, and they will be there for you. And that's an incredible thing to know. So anyway, there you are, you're meditating, and you're getting these nimittas coming up. Once you start to have these coming up, please, the color is not important. Blue, yellow, green, and they change around. It's not important at all. I still remember that guy I was saying about yesterday with that ghost story of the leaves coming off the pot plant, Jim. It may be because his business was a pest exterminator business, which is not the best livelihood. But nevertheless, he's a really good fellow. And when he got a nice nimitta, and he was the first person I heard of, I've heard of others afterwards, who got a black nimitta. And when he came up to tell me, he said, I've never heard that one before. But then I asked him to describe it to me. And then it was a classic description of a nimitta. He said, it was black, but it was a deeper black than anything I've ever seen. It was like shimmering black. It's the most beautiful, deep, satin, glorious black you could ever imagine. It was a wonderful black. So okay, that's good enough, that's a nimitta. The colour was not important. Its intensity, its beauty, its just unworldliness. That was what said, yeah, okay, that's a nimitta. So it can be black, can be yellow, green, blue, or whatever. Don't worry about the colour. There's nothing special about any colour. So you have colour. First of all, the complicated ones, try and make them simple. And once they're reasonably simple, then your job is to keep them still. And also to make them very powerful, make them very bright. And those are the two difficult things to do, to stabilize it and just really empower it. But, they're both achieved, basically. You may be focusing on stabilizing it, focusing on powering it. They're both basically the same thing. Because what is happening is you have to be still. All stages of the meditation, like tests, you go to school, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Every year is a tougher test for you. And as you get more skillful. And all of these stages of meditation are all like tougher tests to get to the next level. You've just got to let go of the past and future to get into the present moment. And you have to learn how to do that one first of all. You have to learn how to let go of thinking to get to some silence. You have to let go of the body to get into the breath. And you have to start getting this delightful breath. Let go of negativity to get to a delightful breath. Be able to let go of the breath, be that still, that you're not hardly metabolizing and the breath vanishes and you get to this nimitta. And now you have to let go of even more movement of the mind. Because the trick was for me that, and it was, this is, the experiences which people have. I was having a nimitta very regularly in my meditation. I couldn't keep it still. I was always moving around the place. And I didn't know what to do. And one day I was shaving in the mirror. And I noticed, the image in the mirror was moving. I was just shaving and I thought, my goodness, that's the answer. The image in the mirror is moving because I'm moving. So I stopped shaving, it was perfectly still. The image in the mirror was perfectly still too. It's obvious, isn't it? And I remember this is what nimitta is. A nimitta is like an image of your mind. It's like looking at your mind in the mirror. This is actually how you experience the mind of these nimittas. And I realized the only reason that nimitta was moving, because me, the one who was watching, I was moving too. And so I started, instead of focusing on the nimitta, I focused, if you like, on this perception of who's the one who's watching this. And the one who was watching, I kept perfectly still. And then my nimitta became perfectly still. It's the one who's watching. It's because you're moving. That's why the nimitta moves. So shut up, be still, don't do anything, freeze. Again, stillness again. So it was another test to even be more still. And the lovely thing at this stage was you were getting instant feedback. If I moved, the nimitta moved. Just like looking in a mirror, if the image moves, you've just moved. You get feedback instantaneously. So that really helped me, to learn how to be absolutely still. So the nimitta was absolutely still too. It didn't move at all, motionless. Now that also is one of the best ways of intensifying the nimitta. Because I've also mentioned to you a general rule of meditation. When you are still, the mind builds up energy. Nothing is wasted. It's like you have a constant source of energy coming into your mind, but a lot of time it's wasted doing stuff. But when you don't do anything at all, which means you're still, you're not doing anything, you're not giving any choices, you're not driving your car, you're absolutely still, then energy starts to pour into the mind. Your mindfulness gets more strong. And you experience that the nimitta gets brighter and brighter. And with its brightness also comes more and more bliss and pleasure. The mental pleasure. It gets more intense, more bright, still stable. If you get excited, it starts to move. And that's what disturbs everything. Keep it still, it gets more and more intense. And these are where you start getting into the really juicy pleasure states of the mind. Intense nimittas are intensely pleasurable. Even at that stage, that's better than sex. Way better than sex. When you get powerful nimittas in the mind. Beautiful lights. And the two obstacles now, are excitement and fear. Those are the two. The Buddha taught that. If you want to look at it, it's in Upakilesa Sutta. Was it 108 or 118 of the Majjhima Nikaya? These are the two big problems with the nimitta. And excitement. Yes, I'm getting somewhere. I'm going to get into jhana. This is it. Yeah, I'm getting enlightened. Oh, don't blow it. It took you all that while to get there, and because of excitement, you blew it. Because I tell you excitement is a problem, it's much more likely now that you won't get excited. Because the deeper you get, the more these instructions are powerful. And you will start to get excited, and something will say, no, don't get excited. And that would have come directly from me on this talk this morning. I've programmed you not to get excited. And you remember that. And there's a good chance you'll avoid that pitfall. And don't be afraid. You're afraid because you're losing things you're very attached to. Your sense of control. This is powerful. We're always afraid of things which are more powerful than us. We think we can't survive. This thing is huge. And you can't control it. And this is amazingly powerful. The most powerful thing you've ever seen. For those of you who've ever read things like Bibles and talked about mystics, have you ever, like in the Bible, the Moses seeing the burning bush, David's as great lights, powerful, awe-inspiring, fearful. That sometimes, I wonder when I started looking at Christianity, what? God is fearful? He's supposed to be soft and all-loving and compassionate. He's supposed to be more teddy bear than a teddy bear is. This idea of an all-loving God. Why is it so fearful? And all it is the power. And these nimittas are incredibly powerful, and our really stupid reaction, but quite understandable, is to be afraid of such power. So instead we learn to trust it. This is probably where you need just faith, some confidence in teachers like me who know what we're talking about. You know, I've been teaching such a long time, never had any casualties. Never one. So you're not going to sort of go crazy, you're not going to die, you're just going to have the time of your life. And sometimes it takes that little bit of confidence to say, okay, let's go further. Because a simile comes up, and it's the best simile I've ever managed to come up with, to show how this actually works. It's a simile of the child who's just learned how to walk, and the mother takes a kid to the swimming pool. And you can imagine what it feels like to be a kid. You've only just learned how to walk on solid land. You get up from crawling and start to walk. And now your mother takes you to this stuff you can't even stand on. It's all wobbly and just gives you no support. What the heck am I going to do? A kid will be terrified of water the first time. So what does the mother do? Just dips a toe in, and pulls it back again quickly. And this actually feels quite nice. So then the mother puts the whole foot in, keeps it there for a few seconds and takes it out. And that's really nice. Then mother puts the whole leg in, and it splashes around a bit. Yeah, this is fun. And then the mother throws it in. Well, not quite, but lets it in. And then the kid enjoys it so much. Once it's all the way in, the mother says, come on, time to go home. No, mummy. You just can't get the kid out because he enjoys it. That's such a good simile for what happens in these deep meditations. It's scary at first, so you just put a toe in and take it out again. It actually feels really nice. Okay, foot in. Well, that's good. Leg? Yeah. And then you jump in, and you can't get out for hours. It was too much fun. Even though your mummy or the monk says, come on, it's time to go. Nope. Too much fun. So this is actually how you overcome the fear. Just go a little bit further in. You always feel perfectly safe. A little bit further in. And you'll find by a little bit of experience, a little bit of confidence, you can actually overcome that fear and allow this nimitta to get incredibly strong. And because it gets very, very strong and very beautiful bliss, you can't hear things. It's similar to when people say, watch the TV. Now go into sort of ordinary life. Sometimes you're watching a soccer match on TV, or a cricket match if you're Sri Lankan, and your wife comes up to you and says, darling, dinner's ready. She's not ignoring you. No, he's not ignoring you, sorry. He just can't hear you. He's like in absorption in the TV. The sense of sound is too far beyond him. It's fallen off his screen. He's so taken up with the movie or with the soccer match, they just cannot hear you. Now that's just a soccer match or a movie. Imagine these incredible nimittas. That you may go up to them and say, look, it's lunchtime. And it's, your friend. It's lunchtime, you're going to miss your lunch. It's 11:30, 11:45, come on, quick. So they just can't hear you. Because they're just so taken up with the bliss of the meditation. So the five senses are just getting very, very much out of reach. And it's so peaceful and so beautiful. And then the next thing which happens with these nimittas, incredibly powerful, very still. And then you feel that yourself getting sucked into these nimittas, or these nimittas overwhelming you, and you go into the jhana realms. And these jhana realms, if you think the nimittas were pretty scary and freaky and blissed out, these jhanas are just multiplied by 1,000. Very peaceful, very blissful. And the objects you're watching is just bliss. The lights are gone. You're not perceiving things with lights anymore. It's just incredible bliss. And if people want to know, because once I start mentioning this, spiritual materialism, ego, conceit, now we all want to have jhanas. So you all come to me with an experience and say, was this a jhana? And most of the time you come up, I say no. So please be prepared to be disappointed. Because if you do have a jhana, you'll be shaking. And I can, before you even ask, I can see that, what you've been doing. Just really, really intensely blissed out of your skull. And it's so sweet to see that. You've experienced a beautiful state. And the reason I say this is just sometimes when you read what the Buddha said about these states, they just really blow you away. Because one of the suttas, it was the first sutta the Buddha gave. It's not Buddha, Mahinda gave when he landed in Sri Lanka. The elephant's footprint simile. Where he said, what are the footprints of an elephant? And, if they're really very big, there could be anything. But when you actually see the elephant sitting there, that's the elephant. And he asked, what are the footprints of a Buddha? How do you know it's a Buddha? What is his footprints? And it's in that sutta, he said, the first footprint of a Buddha, you really know it's a Buddha, is first jhana. Second footprint is the second jhana. Third jhana, fourth footprint, fourth jhana. When you experience a jhana, you are standing in the footprints of a Buddha. It's one thing to go and meditate on a place like the Vulture's Peak, and you know that that's where the Buddha sat, and you can sit in the same place. That's inspiring enough. But when you get into a jhana and realize in that state your mind is exactly the same as the Buddha's mind, just how the Buddha experienced things under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, you are experienced precisely the same. That is freaky. That really sort of makes a thrill come up your spine. It's not just monks who do this. You guys do it as well. And sometimes the most unexpected person gets these things. That's why Ajahn Brahm always asks me after the retreat, did anyone get it this time? Who got it this time? There's always somebody. And a few years ago, this guy came to the retreat, here in Jhana Grove. And he was the last person I would ever expect. He came with tattoos. He looked like a bikie, from the Hells Angels. Rough, Caucasian, long hair, tattoos and stuff like that. And I couldn't believe it. And he started coming in, getting these great experiences, and then he came up one day and, wow, that's it, you just had a jhana. And you can't predict who's going to get it. You get other people, always wearing white, always coming to the temple, always helping out. They never get anything. And these guys, they just come from the bikie club and they come in here and they get jhana straight away. Just wow. So you can't tell who gets what. So it's wonderful actually to be a teacher and see all this stuff. So this is actually how it works. So please be careful about the fear. When these things happen, you'll come across the fear and the excitement. There's great similes on how to deal with this. Ajahn Chah's simile was probably the best, the still forest pool simile. And this helped me a lot because he told these stories, and I remember the story because it's so easy to remember stories. You can visualize it and it's much more complete. You just give the theories, they just let go, be still. That's hard to do. So he would tell this story again and again and again, and it was exactly what you're supposed to do when you get nimittas coming up. Still forest pool, in the days when there were jungles in Thailand, and you could go travelling in those jungles, on this they called it Tudong, Charika in Sri Lanka. It's like wandering. You take your mosquito net, umbrella, you go wandering, walking wherever you wanted to go, and you'd always try and find a lake, a well, or a river about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I went on these walkabouts as a young monk. It's a beautiful time of your life as a monk. And I always remember these moments. There was a great sense of joy and absolute freedom, because in those days that we weren't allowed to keep anything stored up anywhere. So when you left the monastery, you had to carry everything you owned on your back, which was just a bowl, a spare robe, and a bag, and you'd walk. And because you walk, you weren't allowed to take any transport. That would mean that, if it was too heavy, you threw it away. And you soon got to this very, very light load. You know, you wouldn't believe just how little you need to survive. And because we're monks, we're trained on that, and we could just get by with so simple stuff. And we'd walk with everything we owned in a couple of bags, really light. You know, probably half, you know, the smallest of your suitcases, which, you know, you brought here. And you'd have this wonderful feeling. You're walking along the road and you had no appointments, not for the next couple of years. You could go left, right, anywhere. Wherever you went, you'd be able to go on arms round and get something to eat the next day. You didn't have to find a hotel. You could, with your mosquito net, sleep out in the fields or under a tree somewhere. That was totally accepted. And it's amazing, you had no ties at all. You had your food, you had your place to sleep, you carry it on your back. And the sense of freedom was incredible. You don't need any money. You know, it's alms food, enough to, not the best, but enough to keep going. And a place to stay, you know, under a tree, you know, in the fields, wherever. And you're accepted, you'll never be chased away by the villagers. They knew what you were up to. A total sense of no attachments at all. No bonds to family, to friends, to mortgages, you know, to debts, to having to go to work, you know, to family. You're absolutely free. You were like a bird. That's what you felt like. You could fly in any direction wherever you wanted to go. And just like the bird, you can always find some place to eat, some place to sleep at night. Totally safe, totally free. And I'm just reminiscing now, just feeling, oh, wasn't that wonderful years of being totally free. Now I've got monasteries, jhana grows, disciples, oh geez, how did I get into this mess? But anyway, going back to that, you'd always have to find some water in the evening, because you know, you'd been walking all day, you needed to wash. You know, a few days I remember just trying to see what it's like not to wash for 3 or 4 days. I don't know what I smelled like, but I felt disgusting, you know, with all that sweat after 2 or 3 days. And so you find a place to wash, and you've got to get some water for drinking, wash a robe or two or whatever. So you'd find a lake in the forest or some river, and you'd wash, fill up your water bottle, filter the water, and then you'd put up your mosquito net, you know, usually about 20 meters or so, maybe 10, 15 meters away from the edge of the lake, because in the evening the animals would come out to drink as well. This was jungle, had wild animals there. And Ajahn Chah would say that some evenings, you know, after setting up his mosquito net, having washed and everything, he wouldn't close his eyes. Instead of meditating, he would just watch the animals come out to play. It was like Nature Channel for monks. But, he said, and this was a great part of the story, he'd have to be perfectly still, otherwise the animals wouldn't come out. Because in the jungle, for an animal, human beings meant hunters. Mostly the people who got into that part of the jungle were hunting the animals to eat them for food. So the animals, even the tigers, were far more afraid of human beings than human beings afraid of tigers. So they would come out and they would sniff to see if they could smell any human being there. And if they could smell something or see something, even though they were really thirsty, they would not come out to drink. They're afraid for their lives, even though they were bursting for something to drink. But Ajahn Chah knew how to sit still. And he could sit so perfectly still, the animals would come out, they'd look around, they'd sniff, and they wouldn't know he was there. So they'd come out to drink with their young as well and play around. You know, like in these National Geographic channels, they're really cute when you see birds or animals messing around naturally and they don't realize they're being watched. They can be so funny. And that's what he would do for a little entertainment in the evening. But he said they'd only come out once he was still. And he said that sometimes, once the ordinary animals had come out to play, he was so still that really rare animals would come out. Animals which very few human beings had seen, because they were so shy. And if he'd moved even the slightest, they would have known he was there and go back into the bush and not come out for days. But when he was perfectly still, they would come out, these very rare and wonderful animals, more beautiful than anything he'd ever seen, and play by the still forest pool. Those were the jhanas. They'd only come out to play when you are perfectly still. So that's what I used to do. Sometimes you have these nimittas coming up, the ordinary animals, and I'd imagine myself, like Ajahn Chah, sitting perfectly still while these nimittas, like animals, were coming out in the jungle to play by the still forest pool of my mind. I'd imagine I was Ajahn Chah. Nimittas coming. Shh. Perfectly still, and they'd come out. It's as if they would come out to the edge of the mind and have a look. Is anyone there? And if I would look, they'd know they've run off again. But be so still, it was like the nimittas never knew that someone was watching them. And then they'd come out and play in my mind. Beautiful, wonderful. And then you were so still that the jhanas would come out to play. But you had to be that still to be able to do that. And that really helped me, because you could, instead of saying just be still, you can imagine yourself sitting like an Ajahn Chah in the jungle, in the forest next to a lake or a river. And it would help when you have that metaphor there of being perfectly still. So that is a great metaphor, for what to do when these big states come up. Don't move. The other one, which I developed, and somebody told me how well it worked, the last retreat which I gave here, and it was just imagine that you are driving a car in the very busy traffic, maybe 110 kilometers an hour, and you just give the driving wheel to your passenger, say you drive now. You totally let go of all control. Take the keys and give it to your mind so you don't do anything at all. That was the other thing which I did. So I got so far, I got to the nimittas, okay, here's the keys, mind, I'm just the passenger now, I'm not going to do a thing. So imagine I was a passenger really helped. And this one girl, she told me in the last retreat, she had one of these dreams, vivid dreams, and she had to come and tell it to me the first interview after breakfast, after the morning talk. She said she had a dream that she was driving in a car with me in the passenger seat, and it went over a cliff, a big vertical cliff. And at the end there was another big rock. You had to turn a quick right. And as soon as we started going over the cliff, she gave me the driving wheel. She totally let go. And I, of course, did absolutely nothing. Clearing down the cliff, no control at all. And she said, just as they got to the bottom, automatically the car just veered around the rock and was quite safe. So exactly, that's what happened. Just let go. You're perfectly safe. Ajahn Brahm is in the passenger seat of your meditation. So you... So yeah, exactly. Now do that when you're awake, not when you're asleep. And then you have this beautiful meditation. So the idea of like letting go of the wheel of the car, taking your feet off the pedals in fast traffic. That's the thing to do. But and that's only a metaphor, okay? Don't do that in real life. But that's what it actually feels like. And have that confidence you're perfectly safe. And you get these incredible states of mind. So that's actually what these nimittas are like. And I'm sure there's a few things I haven't mentioned about these nimittas, but you can bring them up in the question time or in interviews. So they will come. When you think you have one, almost certainly it is. Oh, they do come early on in the meditation as well, just the mind starting to get strong, but don't really sort of worry about those too much. Go for the big ones when you get very peaceful, very still. 5 senses vanish, and you get lots of happiness coming up in the meditation. Nimittas come in, then they're the good ones, the juicy ones. The ones which come up early, yeah, they're sort of nimittas, yeah, they're sort of okay, but you can't really do much with them. Make sure that you do all of the practices of letting go, keeping things still, 5 senses vanishing, lots of happiness in the meditation, really enjoying yourself, and the 5 senses go, lots of happiness, then you get the real juicy ones. And if they come, don't be afraid, don't be excited. All this time, and now you've got a nimitta, yes! And you blow it straight away. And it may be 6 or 7 more retreats until they come back again. Oh no, stupid. So don't do that, enjoy it instead. Okay.